Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is February 16th, 2026. And I have to say, just looking at the headlines this morning, there is a very specific kind of tension in the air.
Oh, yeah.
It really feels like the geopolitical tectonic plates are, grinding together a little louder than usual.
Loud is a very diplomatic way of putting it. I mean, it's just chaotic out there.
We have Donald Trump back in the White House, and he is certainly not keeping a low profile when it comes to South America.
No.
We have a Labour government here in the UK that seems to be fighting fires on every single front. And amidst all this noise, we decided to do something a little different today.
You did.
Usually we look at mainstream analysis or scientific papers. Today, we are stepping into a completely different ideological universe.
We are. We're taking a stack of articles from Communist Review, specifically issue number 121, which covers January and February 2026. This is the theoretical journal of the Communist Party of Britain.
Okay, so before we get into it, let's just set the ground rules. We aren't here to endorse a revolution, and we certainly aren't handing out membership cards.
No.
The mission today is to treat this journal like an intercepted transmission. We want to understand the logic, the arguments, and the strategy of a group that looks at the exact same world events we do, but sees a completely different picture.
And that's the real value of a deep dive like this. You don't have to agree with the premise to find the logic fascinating.
Right.
Because for the writers in this journal, the war in Venezuela, the staffing crisis in a British care home, and even the symphony orchestra you listen to, they aren't separate things. They are all symptoms of the same disease.
So let's start with the most immediate crisis. It's February 2026, and the lead editorial by Martin Levy, it just drops us right into the heat of the Venezuela conflict.
It really does. And while, the BBC or CNN might be debating the nuances of security measures or restoring order regarding the U.S. strikes and the abduction of President Maduro, the Communist Review just cuts right through all that. They don't see this as a political dispute. They see it as a robbery.
A robbery.
A literal smash and grab. The editorial argues that Trump has made it explicitly clear that this aggression is about one thing and one thing only: seizing Venezuela's oil for U.S. corporations. They compare it directly to the invasions of Grenada and Panama in the past. It's a resource war, plain and simple.
Okay, that's the U.S. side. But what really struck me was the venom that was directed at the UK government. You'd think their main target would be Trump, but they seem even angrier at Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Well, think about their worldview, right? They expect the U.S. to be the imperialist aggressor. That's a given for them.
Sure, that's baked in.
But Starmer's reaction is what proves their theory about Britain's place in the world. The source notes that the Prime Minister refused to condemn the abduction of a foreign leader.
Right.
And he refused to even say whether it broke international law.
And to them, that silence, it just speaks volumes.
It tells them that Britain is a vassal state. I mean, the argument is that the UK government is so terrified of fracturing NATO that it has lost the ability to have an independent foreign policy. And this is a crucial but. They also see a crack in the armor.
I saw that. They brought up the trade deal with China.
Exactly. The editorial points out that despite all of Trump's bravado and his, aggressive posture, he quietly had to cut a deal with Beijing to ensure the supply of rare earth minerals.
Because you can't build high-tech missiles without them.
Precisely. So to the Communist Review, this proves that imperialism, this massive Western power bloc, isn't invincible. It has material limits. It can be leveraged. And that belief, that the giant has feet of clay, it frames everything else they're doing back home.
Which brings us to the internal strategy. The journal includes a comprehensive report from their 58th Congress. This is basically the AGM for the party, right?
Yes, held at Wortley Hall near Sheffield.
Which they call the workers' stately home, which, I have to say, paints a lovely picture of class appropriation.
It does. But look past the venue. The real story here is the people. If I asked you to picture a British Communist Party meeting, what do you see?
Honestly, elbow patches, gray beards, and maybe a lot of dust.
That's the stereotype. But this report by Johnny Hunter claims that 30% of the delegates joined in just the last 2 years.
Wow.
And over a quarter of them are under 30.
That is a significant demographic shift. So what is driving Gen Z into a party that peaked in influence, 80 years ago?
Disillusionment with the alternatives, specifically the Labour Party. The Congress made it official. The divorce is final.
I know there's always been this sort of tug of war on the left, trying to pull labor towards socialism, but this sounds different.
It is different. The resolution passed at this Congress declares that the Labor government of 2026 is openly supporting the interests of monopoly capital.
Strong words.
They call it the party of militarism, and they explicitly state there is no prospect of labor returning to social democracy.
So if the bridge is burned,
Right.
where do they go? They can't possibly win an election on their own.
That's where the United Front comes in. And this isn't just a buzzword, it's their primary strategy now.
Okay.
Since they believe Parliament is a dead end for them, they want to build a broad alliance of trade unions, community groups, tenant unions to exert pressure directly. It's about bypassing the ballot box to strike at the economy.
And they are just talking about wages. I was surprised by how technical the policy debates were. That nuclear power discussion, for instance.
That was fascinating. You typically expect the far left to be purely renewable, anti-nuclear.
Right.
But there was a strong faction at this Congress arguing for nuclear power.
What's the logic there?
China. They cited Chinese success with fusion technology and nuclear reliability. It shows how their international alliances really shape their domestic policy.
Yeah.
If China's doing it, it must be the progressive path to energy security. It's a very technocratic view of progress.
Speaking of international alliances, we have to touch on the guest list. They had a member of the Israeli Knesset there.
Yes, Ofer Kassif from the Hadash Party. And this is really important for listeners trying to place where this group sits on the spectrum.
Okay.
On university campuses, you often hear calls for a one-state solution, but the Communist Review and Kassif are firm. They want a two-state solution based on 1967 borders.
Why that distinction?
Because they're obsessed with sovereignty and self-determination. Kassif argued that a one-state solution under the current conditions would actually deny Palestinian self-determination.
I see.
It reflects a very traditional state-based view of international law rather than just revolutionary slogans.
Okay, so that's the grand chessboard. Wars, treaties, party tactics. But what I really appreciate about this issue, and what surprised me the most, is how it suddenly just zooms right in. We go from the White House Situation Room to a kitchen in Teesside.
This was the article by C. Ritchie, and for me, this was the emotional core of the journal.
It's a boots-on-the-ground account of working in the care industry in 2026. Ritchie is a chef, and he contrasts his time in a council-run respite center versus the private sector.
And the visual contrast he paints is just incredible. He describes the council-run building as this Victorian Gothic pile. He literally compares it to the Addams Family house.
Spooky on the outside.
But on the inside, it was a place of dignity. Unionized staff, decent pay, high morale. The children got one-on-one supervision. It was a place where care actually happened.
And then you have the private facility.
Gloomy, fluorescent lighting. Menus designed by a remote committee that, in his words, hated food.
Wow.
But the detail that just kills me is the entertainment.
The Elvis impersonators.
Every Friday. It's such a perfect metaphor for the critique, isn't it?
It is.
You have this cheap, performative version of fun, a budget Elvis, distracting from the fact that the actual care is being hollowed out.
But this isn't just about bad decor or bad music. The article argues this degradation is a direct result of government policy.
It traces it right back to the Labor government's migration rules in 2025 and 2026. They raised the visa requirement to degree-level qualifications and restricted dependence.
Which, in the middle of a staffing crisis, that sounds like shooting yourself in the foot.
The journal argues it caused a massive labor shortage. And this leads to a concept Ritchie introduces called time poverty. This is something everyone should really understand.
Time poverty. Okay, unpack that for us.
It's the result of treating care like an assembly line. Carers aren't paid for travel time between patients.
Oh, wow.
So if you hit traffic, that time comes out of the visit. You rush the medication. You skip the chat. You treat the human like a task on a checklist because the schedule demands efficiency.
And the staff can't push back.
They are terrified. Many are on sponsored visas. The article points out that if they complain about exploitation, they lose their sponsorship. They lose their home.
So they're trapped.
You have a workforce that is completely trapped. The Communist Review argument is that you simply cannot have for-profit care. The profit motive acts like a corrosive acid on the human element.
You know, this idea that the market inevitably corrupts the thing it touches, that actually bridges us perfectly to the next section. Because if the care industry is about how we treat the body, this next part is about how they think we should treat the soul.
We're talking about the Marx musicology section.
I have to admit, I did not see this coming. We're doing a deep dive into Alan Bush.
A fascinating figure. He's a British composer, would have turned 125 this year. The journal argues he was effectively erased from British cultural history because of his politics.
Right.
MI5 spied on him, the BBC wouldn't play his major works, but in East Germany, he was a superstar.
But the article goes deeper than just biography. It digs up an archive piece Bush wrote in 1949 defending Soviet musical theory. And this is where my brain started to hurt a little bit. He defends the Zhdanov Decree.
Right. Now, if you took a music history class in the West, you were taught that the Zhdanov Decree was a bad thing.
A very bad thing.
It was Stalin's bureaucrats telling geniuses like Shostakovich to stop being creative and write simple, happy marching tunes.
They accused them of formalism.
Yes. And we need to define that because it's the key to their entire view on art. Formalism in this context means prioritizing the form, the technique, the complexity, the abstract dissonance over the message.
So making art for other artists.
Exactly. Bush argues that if you write a symphony that is so complex and abstract that a factory worker can't hum it or feel it, you aren't being a genius, you're being an elitist.
Wow.
You are creating an esoteric luxury for a tiny circle of what he calls musical gourmands.
It's such a complete reversal of how we usually think. We value the tortured artist who ignores the audience to express their truth. Bush is saying, no, you are a worker. Your job is to uplift the other workers.
It connects back to that total worldview. A symphony is never just a symphony. It's either reinforcing the bourgeois status quo by being exclusive, or it's revolutionary by being accessible. They call it socialist realism. Art with a job to do.
So we've looked at care and we've looked at culture. But the big question that always hangs over this ideology is, how do you pay for it all? It's easy to say end profit, but we all know the history of empty shelves.
And to their credit, the article by Jerry Jones on central planning versus markets addresses that head on. He doesn't pretend the Soviet Union was an economic paradise.
He brings up the folding shopping bag.
I love this detail. He mentions that Soviet citizens used to carry a string bag in their pocket at all times.
Just in case.
Just in case they walked past a shop that suddenly had goods in stock.
Which is basically an admission of failure. The system couldn't distribute basic stuff.
Right. Jones admits that central planning was terrible at consumer goods. Managers lied about capacity to get bonuses. Goods were shoddy just to meet quotas. So he isn't advocating for a return to the Soviet model.
So what is the alternative? If you hate capitalism, but you admit Soviet planning failed, what's left?
A hybrid. He proposes what you might call a bi-level economy.
Walk us through that.
Okay, so level 1 is the commanding heights. The state owns the big infrastructure, rail, energy, water, the banks. That is centrally planned.
Right.
But level 2 is everything else: food, clothing, services, technology. For that, he proposes cooperatives.
And he uses the Mondragon example.
Yes, the Mondragon Corporation in Spain. It's a massive federation of worker-owned cooperatives. The argument is that this solves the riddle.
How so?
You get the efficiency of the market because the co-op still has to compete and sell things, but you remove the exploitation because the workers own the profits.
It's an attempt to answer the question, can we have equity without having everyone queue for bread?
Exactly. It's a vision of a market economy without capitalists.
We've covered a huge amount of ground here. Global oil wars, the internal split of the left, the time poverty in care homes, the politics of classical music, cooperative economics.
It's a dense manifesto.
But there is one last theoretical concept we need to land on, because it explains how they think they're going to achieve any of this. It's the article by Kevin Donnelly about the spatialization of politics.
This is a bit theoretical, but stay with me because it explains their strategy. Donnelly looks at the massive protests in Chile back in 2019.
Millions of people in the streets.
But notice where they started. Not in the factories. They started in the barrios, the urban margins, sparked by a rise in subway fares.
Okay.
Donnelly argues that in the modern world, the city itself is the battleground. Your rent, your commute, your bus fare, that is where the conflict is, not just on the factory floor.
But he doesn't just praise the protests, says he. There's a warning there.
A severe one. He argues that while those protests were explosive, they ultimately failed to change the system. Why? Because they were spontaneous. They lacked deep organizing.
So anger isn't enough.
That's the lesson. The Communist Review argues that spontaneous populism, just getting people angry in the streets. It burns out. You need a party structure. You need a framework to channel that energy, or the system will just wait you out.
Which brings us full circle to their mission.
It does.
If you had to look at this entire journal, from Venezuela to the music theory, and sum up their message to the world in 2026, what is it?
I think the word is interconnectedness. They are saying you cannot fix the care home in Teesside without addressing the foreign policy in Venezuela.
Right.
You can't fix the economy without rethinking the culture. They see capitalism as a single rot-filled root system. You can't just prune the dead leaves. You have to dig up the whole tree.
It's an incredibly confident worldview. I mean, they look at the chaos of our year, the wars, the instability, and they say, we have a plan.
And they leave us with the challenge. There is a quote from Lenin in the text that really stood out to me. We must not stand with folded arms and let chaos develop.
And that is the thought I want to leave you with today. Whether you agree with their methods, their history, or their politics, and there is plenty to debate there, the question they pose is valid. In 2026, do we have a plan for a world where everyone is cared for? Or are we just standing with folded arms, letting the chaos develop?
That is the question of the decade.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next one.